Today we will continue with our study from last week about the French Reformation. The Reformation, just to clarify, took place all over Europe. What we are studying today and last week was what happened in France during this time. It is prophesied in the Bible, as I've highlighted last week, and we won't touch that prophecy today, but we will look at some of the stories of the people who were involved in this Reformation. Not all, but some of them, the main characters that helped the Reformation, and some of them even gave up their lives in order to help in the process. So the French Reformation, that's our topic for today, part 2. Before we touch on the story of France, I would like us to just go back to the Bible. In Daniel chapter 8, verses 10, 11, and 12. From here we will base our studies so that we will be able to decode what happened in France. Daniel chapter 8, verse 10. If we can read verse 10 together. 2, 3. And it, the little horn, waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground, and stepped upon them. Verse 11. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. So we are talking about this little horn. Verses 1 to 9 tells us about what happened to this little horn, that beast that came out of the sea with 7 heads and 10 horns. And another horn came up after the 10 horns, and it uprooted how many horns? 3 horns. And this little horn was the one that it grew, according to that prophecy, it grew up, and then it challenged the host of heaven, as it says in here. And it says he magnified himself to the Prince of Hosts, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. So we'll be thinking of what is this daily sacrifice. So we need to get back to the Old Testament in order to understand this, into Leviticus, into those books by Moses, which clarified this. So every day Israel was doing a daily sacrifice. This was in the sanctuary. And what do we know about the sanctuary? What did King David say? Your sanctuary, O Lord, thy ways, O Lord, is in thy sanctuary. When this sanctuary was cast down, what happened to his ways? It goes together with it. His ways have been cast away from the people. Now they have been blinded. When this prophecy is taking place centuries later, this is exactly what has happened. The sanctuary was cast down. All the truths that were there in the people of God had been removed from them. And we will see who did that. This little horn that we are talking about here. Verse 12, let's read verse 12. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. That was the main goal of this power. That little horn that grew up after the 10 horns. It was to cast down the truth to the ground, and then it practiced itself, and then prospered. That is exactly what happened to this power. It took away the truth, and it brought out its own truth and gave it to the people, and then it prospered. And it prospered, it includes wealth. So that's exactly what happened. We will have to identify, and I'm sure we've already identified that in past prophecies that we've studied, who this person is, or who this power is. Let us just go back to that same prophecy covers this time period. It talks about a 2,300 year time period. And we've already deciphered this 2,300 years. And it began in, what year is that? 457. What happened in this year? 457 BC. This was during the time Daniel and the people of Judah were imprisoned in Babylon. And who gave this command? It was after the first kingdom. Which one was the first kingdom? Babylon. Babylon went over to Jerusalem and took Judeans captive to Babylon. And after Babylon ruled for some time, which was the next kingdom that came and conquered it?
Greece.
Medo-Persia. And this was during the time, the rule of the Medo-Persian Empire. 457. One of its emperors gave the command. What did he command the people to do? He sent them back home. Go back and rebuild the city of Jerusalem. And that was when this command was given. Remember when Daniel was trying to know what the prophecy was about? He was crying and he prayed to God, and he sent Gabriel, the archangel. And Gabriel said, from the time a command will be given to go and rebuild Jerusalem, that's when you start your 2,300 year period. And if we take from 457 BC, 2,300 years later, it comes to
1844.
1844. And what happened in 1844?
The Great Disappointment.
The Great Disappointment. So all this fell just as it was predicted in the Bible. So that was the last of the time prophecies. After 1844, we just go by science. Something that happened after that was 1929. That we just waited, and history records it. 1929, what happened in 1929? Mussolini gave back the power to the Vatican. Yeah? So that was after this time period. So we are looking at this time period from 457 to 1844. During this time period, 49 years later, it took the people of God 49 years to rebuild the city. Rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. You know, with that prophecy it says, 7 weeks are given to you to go and rebuild. But another 62 weeks from 407 to 27 AD. What was that prophecy about? For you to make good with God, your relationship with God. your relationship amongst yourself. Know yourself, and because during this time, after 62 weeks or 69 weeks from here, there's 7 weeks, and this is another 62 weeks. During this time, what will happen? They will have to anoint the most holy. And who was that? Who was anointed here? Jesus Christ. They baptized him in the river Jordan, 27 AD. And it says another week, from here to here is 1 week. That's about 27 to 34, that's 7 years. So this time period is one that is talked about a lot in Christianity today. Most say that this time period was removed from here and taken right to the end of time. They say that it hasn't happened. But the Bible is so clear. In the middle of that week, what will happen? Jesus died. 3.5 years after he was baptized, he was put up on the cross in 31 AD. 34 AD, what happened? 34 AD, when Stephen was stoned, and then the disciples and all the Christians were chased away from Jerusalem. And what did they do? They scattered out into the world. That's how the gospel was spread all over the place, because they was chased away from Jerusalem. And then, see, still within this 2,300 year period is this period here. Now it's 500 years later, 538 AD. What happened in 538 AD?
The beginning of the Dark Ages.
The beginning of the Dark Ages, when the Dark Ages represent the rule of the papal system throughout this year, throughout Europe. And that dark period is, how long is this period here?
1,260 years.
1,260 years, or 42 months, or three times. In Daniel it says 3 times. So that's this period here. And it is this period here when France, we're talking about things are happening in France. Not only in France, but all over Europe, all over where Christianity was, it was happening. The rule of this dark, that little horn, this was during this period too, when the truth was trampled on the ground, to the ground, and hidden away from the population. That's why it's called the Dark Ages, because there's no truth. 538 to 1798. And then afterwards was the Great Disappointment, 1844, and that happened where? Right here on this land that we are in. Right here in America. So that's sort of introduction to our story today. And timeline on that period we are studying from 538 to 1798. We talked about this. What happened in this year, 1512? In Germany, Martin Luther named those theses, 95 theses, on the church door at Wittenberg. Yeah? And he started the Reformation period. They broke away from the Catholic Church and he started the Lutheran Church. And when we are studying the Reformation in France, this was their main enemy. The Lutheran Church, the people who had been exposed to the Bible and joined the Lutheran Church, they were much brighter. And the devil didn't want that. They want everybody to be kept in the dark. Right? Sorry, that wasn't 1512, that was in 1517. This is Martin Luther. But before that, who did we say was already writing about justification or faith justification?
The,
Who was it?
the,
What?
who, the
No.
boat?
Lafave.
Oh, yeah, Lafayette.
Lafave. So he was already being enlightened. And he was already writing in his books that you do not gain salvation by yourself. You only, you can only attain salvation through faith in Christ. So 1517 was Martin Luther, and then the Reformation took place all over here. So during this period, 538 to 1512, the whole of Europe was in darkness. That's when that little horn trampled on the truth. And all these people, until light began to shine over here and came forth until today. So you see, over the time period, what happened? We're talking about this particular period, 538 to 1798, and 1,000 years from here, when the light started, people started protesting out of the Catholic Church. That's why we have Protestant churches today. Just out of interest, are we still protesting?
No.
Not anymore. What are we doing instead? We are going back to Rome. All our churches have gone back to Rome and signed agreements apologizing for breaking away from the churches. And the very opposite is happening. We are all going back to the dark ages. Martin Luther, we've gone through that. That took place in 1517. Lafave, he was born in 1455 and died in 1536. He wrote those theses in 1512, Justification by Faith. And then we know that one of his students was
William Farel.
William Farel. And through their teachings, someone got interested too, and who was it? The Catholic Bishop of Newark. And through this man, they begin to expose the Bible, which was only read and interpreted by highly educated people or the nobles. But during this time, the time of Bishop Milks in France, he gave all this to the people. And France was enlightened through the book. One of the products that came out of it is this guy, Louis the Queen. He was of noble birth. We learned last week that he was in prison 3 times. And who helped him? Because he was a noble, the king himself set him free. After he was in prison, he set him free. In prison again, he set him free through his power as king. But then one thing happened. The papal authority, what did they do? They took him to court, sentenced him to death. And when was that death going to take place? That very same day. Out from the courthouse, they took him straight to the altar. They burned him alive. And they did not leave any chance for that same king, King Francis, to free him again. That's how the reformers were treated during those days. And then we ended with John Calvin, another French who rose up during that time, sometime after these people here. And he took on that light and moved the French Reformation even further. John Calvin cannot continue his studies for the priesthood once he found the truth. I found out too that during that time it was a big achievement to be studying for the priesthood, because they were highly paid, they were highly favored by the authorities, and even by the Pope and papal system, and they carried on from so a lot of people who went to study in universities ended up being priests. They studied the Bible and they were enlightened. And one of them was Mr. John Calvin. He moved from Paris to provincial towns under the protection of Princess Margaret, the king's daughter. This is another person who influenced the Reformation in France. The king, King Francis, remember he was the one who saved what was his name? Bequin or Bequin, Louise de Bequin. The daughter is Princess Margaret of France. And she was interested in the Bible. And she was protecting all those who were in the Reformation. And remember King Francis was the one who said this 3 times before he was burned alive. So this woman, Princess Margaret of France, was another of those people who rose up during those dark days of France to help with the Reformation. As to us, this is what Calvin did. Once he knew the truth, he knew he cannot stay in France because they were going to burn him alive. So he ran away from there into the provinces where Princess Margaret was influential, and he used Princess Margaret for his protection. And in those areas, he went from house to house. Calvin read the Bibles to families and went from city to city laying the foundation of churches that were to yield fearless witnesses for the truth. So even though there was a lot of opposition from the papal authority, people who rose up with the truth, they had to endure all those persecutions. But they did it without fear. And one of them was John Calvin. Paris was given another chance to receive the gospel through Calvin's ministry. Remember Lefebvre, remember William Farel, the Bishop of Neux. All these people were exiled from Paris, from France, and they went to neighboring countries to be protected there. But through Calvin's ministry, France had one more chance to accept the word of God. The Princess Edward. Let's see what this Princess Margaret, did. The king, influenced by political consideration, had not yet fully sided with Rome against the Reformation. Margaret still clung to the hope that Protestantism was to triumph in France. So this Princess Margaret, once she knew the truth, she was hoping that the whole of France would get hold of this truth and then help the country in its progress. During the absence of the king, this is what she did. She ordered a Protestant minister to preach in the churches of the city. This being forbidden by the papal dignitaries, the princess threw open the palaces. They closed the churches, and what she did, she opened up the palace of the king. The king was away, and they came and used the palace. An apartment was fitted up as a chapel, and it was announced that every day at a specified hour, a sermon would be preached, and the people of every rank and station were invited to attend. Crowds flocked to the service. You can imagine, that was how hungry the people were for the word of God, for the truth that was trampled down by that little horn. And we know who that little horn is. The king supported. The king knew of what his daughter was doing. For 2 years, the word of God was preached in the capital, but while there were many who accepted the gospel, the majority of the people rejected it. Francis had made a show of toleration, so this is the king, Francis, merely to serve his own purpose. Remember, he was a politician. He needed the support of the church, which was very powerful in Europe at that time. And he also needed the support of the people. So he was a politician. So what he decides was for his own interest only. and the papists succeeded in regaining the ascendancy. He saw that the power of the papists was what he needed to stay alive and to hold on to his position as king. So he gave in to the papal system. Again, the churches were closed and the stakes were set out. As soon as he gave in, what did the papists do? Set up all the altars again. Any Christian who wants to break our law will have to get into the fire and be burned alive. Amazing to see. Again, the churches were closed and the stakes were set up. That happened in France. The authorities was John Calvin because of his push for this light to be known throughout France. He brought in the wrath of the papists. While others assisted the reformer to let himself down from a window, this is how he escaped. It's like a cowboy movie, or others to let the reformer let himself down the window, and he rapidly made his way to the outskirts of the city. Finding shelter in the quarters of a laborer who was a friend of the reform, he disguised himself in the garments of his host, like a farmer, and shouldering a hoe, started on his journey. Traveling southward, he again found refuge in the dominions of Margaret, the king's daughter. That's how those reformers lived. They had to run for their lives. It brings up some ideas of how we will have to live in these last days. We cannot go against the authority all the time. Sometimes you have to be smart, move, run away. We'll see what happened to things that happened during that time. The cave church. Calvin's heart was set upon the evangelization of France. This man wanted France to be enlightened. He could not long remain inactive. He sought a new field of labor in Pontius, that's another city. After a time, as the number of hearers increased, it was thought safer to assemble outside the city. As the group grew, it became unsafe. So what they do, they look for a place to go and worship. A cave in the side of a deep and narrow gorge, where trees and overhanging rocks made the seclusion still more complete, was chosen as the place of the meeting. Outside the city, in a cave, that's where they went and worshipped. Aren't you blessed to be here, right in this church today? But maybe one day we'll be like the reformists of France, and we'll have to look for a for a cave. Yeah. From this little church, several faithful evangelists were sent out. Right from that cave, church cave, cave church. Right from that cave church, they managed to find a few evangelists who they sent out to evangelize France. Ill-judged movement. Now let's see how the reformers, some of the mistakes that they did. This is one thing that they did. The French reformers, eager to see their country keeping pace in Germany, or with Germany and Switzerland. So what does that mean? Germany and Switzerland have advanced, not only spiritually, but financially, intellectually. They were much more advanced. What was keeping France back? They did not accept the light that the Word of God was bringing. These other countries have accepted. And as a result, the whole economy of the country grew. People were more enlightened, they were more educated. Not in France. Their rejection of the Bible led to their regression. Instead of advancing, the reform the zealous but ill-judged movement. Oh, this is what these people did in France, the reformers. Accordingly, placards attacking the mass were in one night posted all over France. So this was their plan. They planted placards all over condemning the church, condemning the king, and instead of advancing the reform, see, this is the result of what they did, their action. This zealous but ill-judged movement brought ruin not only upon its propagator, not only to those who were doing it, but upon the friends of the Reformed faith throughout France. What they did, even though it was with good intention, had a very negative effect. It gave the Romanists what they had long desired. What did they long desire? A pretext for demanding the utter destruction of the heretics and agitators, dangerous to the stability of the throne and the peace of the nation. So they were looking for excuses to remove these people. And what the reformers themselves did, gave them the right excuse to exterminate them. So that gives us a lesson too. We should be careful on what we do. We should be very much like we do not rush into what we do. We have to be bold, but like these people, we have to make sure that we do the right thing in now going against the false teaching or the darkness. And but some secret hand, whether or indiscreet friend or white really foe, was never known. One of the placards was attached to the door of the king's private chamber. So somebody went to the king's private chamber and put up one of those placards. And the king was so furious about what happened. And this is what he said: "Let all be ceased." Remember the king, he was a politician, he was somewhere in between. He couldn't make up his decision whether to be with the reformers or to be with the papists. But this incident, after it took place, this is what he said: "Let all be seized without distinction who are suspected of Lutheracy." Notice how what he said there? It's something like leprosy. It should be the Lutheran. But now he's saying Lutheracy. So he's classing the church, the Lutheran church, something like a bad disease. Lutheracy. "I will exterminate them all." The die was cast. The king had determined to throw himself fully on the side of the road of Rome. So he was somewhere in between. Because of that ill-judged decision by the reformists, he was forced to jump onto the papist side. And the whole Christian world of France was affected by that, what happened. Wise and harmless. That brings us to this Matthew chapter 10, verse 16. Let's just read this verse. 2, 3.
Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves.
That's right, how we as Christians of today, because everyone will hate the truth. Satan will stir up the population to go against the truth that we want to stand up for. God has counseled us on what to do. We should be acting like sheep in the midst of wolves, wise as a
serpent
and harmless as a dove. Wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. the cruel torture results. The victims were put to death with cruel torture, especially ordered that the fire should be lowered in order to prolong their agony. So before they just put the fire on and you died instantly. But now they said, slow the fire down, let him roast, make him suffer. But what happened? See what they died as conquerors. Their constancy were unshaken, their peace unclouded. Their persecutors, this is the result of these people being calm, even though they slowed down the fire. Their persecutors, powerless to move their inflexible firmness, felt themselves defeated because they did not give in. They thought slowing down the fire, let him burn slowly, will make them recant. But no, they were so peace, unclouded, unshaken, constant in their faith. And they died, resulting in the persecutors felt that they were defeated through those people's death. Amazing, eh? False accusation. This is what will happen. It happened to the reformists in France. It will happen to you too if you want to stand for the truth. The priests, bent upon keeping the popular fury at its height, circulated the most terrible accusation against the Protestants. They were charged with plotting to massacre the Catholics, to overthrow the government, and to murder the king. Not a shadow of evidence could be produced in support of these enemies. So, if you want to stand for the truth, you will be blamed for things that you did not do. And you have to expect it. This book tells us that we have to be ready for false accusations. The Lutheran link, it was not the establishment but the suppression of Protestantism. Because France chose to suppress Protestantism, to suppress the reformers from giving up the light which was sourced from the Bible. This is what happened. 300 years later was to bring upon France those dire calamities. Suspicion, distrust, and terror now pervaded all classes of society. And you know that a country with all these characteristics among the population will not move forward, will not advance. Amid the general alarm, it was seen how deep a hold the Lutheran teaching had gained upon the minds of men who stood highest for education, influence, and excellence of character. What were they mentioning the Lutheran? Because those were the only Protestants of that time. They had just protested out of Catholicism. Later on, the Methodists and the Baptists, they protested out afterwards. But during this time, it was the Lutheran. And their teaching, even though not complete, they did not know anything about the Sabbath. But they were standing up for the truth that they were exposed to. See the result of their teaching? Highest education, strong influence, and excellence of character. Just for standing up for the truth of those days. Remember, there was no Sabbath truth then. The Sabbath came after the 1844 date. Penalties: to read the Bible, to hear or preach it, or even to speak concerning it was to incur the penalty of
death
by the stake. To pray to God in secret, in secret. To refrain from bowing to an image, if you don't want to bow down to an image, or to sing a psalm was also punishable with death. All the punishment was death. Even those who should abjure their errors were condemned. If man, to die by the if woman, to be buried alive. Those are the penalties that the reformists were exposed to during those times. regression. Under the rule of the Roman Church, the people were sunken in poverty and ground down by oppression. They were destitute of the scriptures and having a religion of mere signs and ceremonies, which conveyed no light to the mind. That's why they were less educated. They were not like the countries, what other two countries, Germany and Switzerland, that was mentioned earlier. Because they have advanced because of their exposure to the Bible. Superstition, beliefs, and pagan practices of their heathenists, they were rejected because there was John Calvin, because of his push for this light to be known throughout France. He brought in the wrath of the papists. While others assisted the reformer to let himself down from a window, this is how he escaped. It's like a cowboy movie, or others to let the reformer let himself down the window, and he rapidly made his way to the outskirts of the city. Finding shelter in the quarters of a laborer who was a friend of the reform, he disguised himself in the garments of his host, like a farmer, and shouldering a hoe, started on his journey. Traveling southward, he again found refuge in the dominions of Margaret, the king's daughter. That's how those reforms lived. They had to run for their lives. It brings up some ideas of how we will have to live in these last days. We cannot go against the authority all the time. Sometimes you have to be smart, move, run away. We'll see what happened to things that happened during that time. The cave church. Calvin's heart was set upon the evangelization of France. This man wanted France to be enlightened. He could not long remain inactive. He sought a new field of labor in Pontius, that's another city. After a time, as the number of hearers increased, it was thought safer to assemble outside the city. As the group grew, it became unsafe. So what they do, they look for a place to go and worship. A cave in the side of a deep and narrow gorge, where trees and overhanging rocks made the seclusion still more complete, was chosen as the place of the meeting. Outside the city, in a cave, that's where they went and worshipped. Aren't you blessed to be here, right in this church today? But maybe one day we'll be like the reformists of France, and we'll have to look for a for a cave. Yeah? From this little church, several faithful evangelists were sent out. Right from that cave, church cave, cave church. Right from that cave church, they managed to find a few evangelists who they sent out to evangelize France. Ill-judged movement. Now let's see how the reformers, some of the mistakes that they did. This is one thing that the French reformers, eager to see their country keeping pace in Germany, with Germany and Switzerland. So what does that mean? Germany and Switzerland have advanced, not only spiritually, but financially, intellectually. They were much more advanced. What was keeping France back? They did not accept the light that the Word of God was bringing. These other countries have accepted. And as a result, the whole economy of the country grew. People were more enlightened, they were more educated. Not in France. Their rejection of the Bible led to their regression. Instead of advancing the reform, the zealous but ill-judged movement, this is what these people did in France, the reformers. Accordingly, placards attacking the mass were in one night posted all over France. So So this was their plan. They planted placards all over condemning the church, condemning the king, and instead of advancing the reforms, see, this is the result of what they did, their action. This zealous but ill-judged movement brought ruin not only upon its propagator, not only to those who were doing it, but upon the friends of the Reformed faith throughout France. What they did, even though it was with good intention, had a very negative effect. It gave the Romanists what they had long desired. What did they long desire? A pretext for demanding the utter destruction of the heretics and agitators, dangerous to the stability of the throne and the peace of the nation. So they were looking for excuses to remove these people. And what the reformers themselves did, gave them the right excuse to exterminate them. So that gives us a lesson too. We should be careful on what we do. We should be very much like we do not rush into what we do. We have to be bold, but like these people, we have to make sure that we do the right thing in now going against the false teaching or the darkness. And but some secret hand, whether or indiscreet friend, while really foe, was never known. One of the placards was attached to the door of the king's private chamber. So somebody went to the king's private chamber and put up one of those placards. And the king was so furious about what happened. And this is what he said: let all be ceased. Remember the king, he was a politician, he was somewhere in between. He couldn't make up his decision whether to be with the reformers or to be with the papists. But this incident, after it took place, this is what he said: let all be seized without distinction who are suspected of Lutheracy. Notice how what he said there? It's something like leprosy. It should be the Lutheran. But now he's saying Lutheracy. So he's classing the church, the Lutheran church, something like a bad disease. Lutheracy. I will exterminate them all. The die was cast. The king had determined to throw himself fully on the side of the road of Rome. So he was somewhere in between. Because of that ill-judged decision by the reformists, he was forced to jump onto the papist side. And the whole Christian world of France was affected by that, what happened. Wise and harmless. That brings us to this Matthew chapter 10, verse 16. Let's just read this verse. 2, 3.
Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves.
That's right, how we as Christians of today, because everyone will hate the truth. Satan will stir up the population to go against the truth that we want to stand up for. God has counseled us on what to do. We should be acting like sheep in the midst of wolves, wise as a
serpent
and harmless as a dove. Wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. The cruel torture results. The victims were put to death with cruel torture, especially ordered that the fire should be lowered in order to prolong their agony. So before they just put the fire on and he died instantly. But now they said, slow the fire down, let him roast. Yeah? Make him suffer. But what happened? See what but they died as conquerors. Their constancy were unshaken. Their peace unclouded. Their persecutors, this is the result of these people being calm, even though they slowed down the fire. Their persecutors, powerless to move their inflexible firmness, felt themselves defeated. Because they did not give in. They thought slowing down the fire, let him burn slowly, will make them recant. But no, they were so peace, unclouded, unshaken, constant in their faith. And they died, resulting in the persecutors felt that they were defeated through those people's death. Amazing, eh? False accusation. This is what will happen. It happened to the reformists in France. It will happen to you too if you want to stand for the truth. The priests, bent upon keeping the popular fury at its height, circulated the most terrible accusation against the Protestants. They were charged with plotting to massacre the Catholics, to overthrow the government, and to murder the king. Not a shadow of evidence could be produced in support of these enemies. So, if you want to stand for the truth, you will be blamed for things that you did not do. And you have to expect it. This book tells us that we have to be ready for false accusations. The Lutheran link, it was not the establishment but the suppression of Protestantism. Because France chose to suppress Protestantism, to suppress the reformers from giving up the light which was sourced from the Bible. This is what happened. 300 years later was to bring upon France those dire calamities. Suspicion, distrust, and terror now pervaded all classes of society. And you know that a country with all these characteristics among the population will not move forward, will not advance. Amid the general alarm, it was seen how deep a hold the Lutheran teaching had gained upon the minds of men who stood highest for education, influence, and excellence of character. What were they mentioned in the Lutheran? Because those were the only Protestants of that time. They had just protested out of Catholicism. Later on, the Methodists and the Baptists, they protested out afterwards. But during this time, it was the Lutheran. And their teaching, even though not complete, they did not know anything about the Sabbath. But they were standing up for the truth that they were exposed to. See the result of their teaching? Highest education, strong influence, and excellence of character. Just for standing up for the truth of those days. Remember, there was no Sabbath truth then. The Sabbath came after the 1844 date. Penalties: to read the Bible, to hear or preach it, or even to speak concerning it was to incur the penalty of
death
by the stake. To pray to God in secret, in secret. To refrain from bowing to an image, if you don't want to bow down to an image, or to sing a psalm was also punishable with death. All the punishment was death. Even those who should abjure their errors were condemned. If man, to die by the, if woman, to be buried alive. Those are the penalties that the reformists were exposed to during those times. Regression: under the rule of the Roman Church, the people were sunken in poverty and ground down by oppression. They were destitute of the scriptures and having a religion of mere signs and ceremonies, which conveyed no light to the mind. That's why they were less educated. They were not like the countries, what other two countries, Germany and Switzerland, that was mentioned earlier. Because they have advanced because of their exposure to the Bible. Superstition, beliefs, and pagan practices of their heathenists, they were returned, because they returned to the superstitious belief. So they moved backwards instead of advancing forward because of the rejection of the light, the Bible, that all these reformers were standing up for. That ends our study today. And I just want to bring to us today, we've seen what the reformers went through. And if we want to stand up for God's truth, that's exactly what we will go through during these last days. And the Bible has warned us that it will even be worse for us at the last days. It will be worse. Reading through what these people went through, it was bad. It was frightening. But it will be even worse for us in these last days. So, our only hope is in God. That's where we will set our hope. We will leave it to Him. We cannot hide. We know the technology today, even if you hide underground, you dig some 30, 40 feet underneath, they'll find you. You will only have to hide in God. He is the one who's going to hide you from all this technology. So, the reformers have shown us that life won't be easy. And it's God's message to us today to expect the same these last days. Thank you.